Welcome back to Raised by Giants. I'm Ryder Lee. We are live. Welcome everyone in the chat, moderators and members out there. Thanks for joining in. We have a very special episode here for you guys today. The very first Stargate Roundtable Discussion, a reunion of sorts with official personnel from the DIA's Stargate Remote Viewing Program. They've all been on the show multiple times. And first up, we have the first remote viewer from the Stargate project that I first spoke to with on my show, who worked for over 32 years for the intelligence community in Washington, D.C. The Defense Intelligence Agency hired her in 1986 to participate in the Stargate Psychic Phenomenon program. Angela Ford, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me back. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited about this conversation we're getting ready to have. And next up, we have retired Sergeant First Class who served in the United States Army and is a founding member of the International Remote Viewing Association. He served as a trainer in the United States Army Remote Viewing Unit from 1984 to 1992, and who the movie The Men Who Stare at Ghosts is based off of. Lyn Buchanan, welcome back to the show. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing great. Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me, especially with this group. I'm very happy to be here with Angela and Dale, and they're impressive. They really are.
So are you. So are you.
And next up, last but not least, we have the director of the Stargate Project, the government program for researching the applications of remote viewing, an aspect of extrasensory perception. And not only was he the director, but he actually coined the name Stargate to symbolize the innovative effort of exploration and expanded range of human potential. Dale Graff, welcome back to the show. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, listen, I'm great. I thank you very much for inviting me back, and particularly to be connected with Angela and Lyn. This is almost like have a staff meeting.
An amazing reunion.
Get your notepads ready, Angela and Lyn. Pay attention. Okay, so thanks for bringing us in.
No problem, and it's a fantastic panel of guests here. Incredible bringing you all here together. I feel very honored. Now, quickly, Dale, can you verify for the audience Angela and Lyn's participation in the unit? Not that it needs to be verified, but for the sake of the audience, both Angela and Lyn were in the unit when you were there as the director of the program, correct?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, they were there even before I moved up into that group to assume the group responsibilities. Definitely, they were there. Of course, even before I arrived on the scene at Fort Meade, I had been down at the home office of DIA in Washington, D.C. before that happened. But no question, they were up there. And Angela, I think, from 1986, and Lyn might have even been off and on a little earlier. Lyn can probably fill in the dates on that better than I can. Oh, yeah, they've been, and of course, Lyn was in there for a while, then came back a little later after another tour. So it was like a double tour for him. So absolutely, these are long-term members of the Stargate unit.
I think, Lyn, you were there when I came in. And I think, did you come the second time around 1985?
No, I was there one time. Paul was there twice, and Mel was there twice.
So what year did you come in? Because I think I came in after you.
Yeah, I came in 84.
84.
Early 84, yeah.
I came in 86, I came in right after you. Like, in other words, they picked you and then I came in.
Right,
I thought it was 84 or 85.
Yeah.
Now, Angela and Lyn, you can both verify, again, not that it needs to be done, but that Dale Graff was the director of the Stargate Remote Viewing Program at Fort Meade, correct?
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Now, Dale, what was, if you can think back, what was Angela known for within the remote viewing unit at Fort Meade? Was she accurate with her technique by what you can remember as a remote viewer?
Well, of course, by the time, even before I was assigned to the unit full time, I would travel to the unit with different tasks and coordinate that and look at the results. And of course, I was quite impressed by the data this year's prediction, even before I got there. And then, of course, there were times during my tenure when we had some projects that really was quite amazing in a way. So, of course, I can verify that easily.
What about Lyn? What was he known for within the unit, and was he accurate with his abilities to remote view as well?
Oh, of course, yeah. And Lyn did a lot of instructing and coordinating and helping people develop their own abilities. So, yeah, and at times I worked with him directly. The information was really, really outstanding. And even sometimes when the tasks were not exactly clear, he seemed to come up with information that added clarity to that. And I can remember times when he actually came to me afterwards, this is even not during a formal tasking, with impressions of something that he came up with after the task that then turned out to be also verifiable.
Now, from my understanding and speaking with you guys and speaking with other participants in the Stargate project, this was a very small group of people in the unit, with only about roughly around 20 people were ever a part of this unit since its inception in '79. Through all of the shuffling around between Army intelligence and the DIA and the name changes throughout the years, only 20 people were ever involved is incredible. Maybe only 10 to 15 people at one time were there, possibly even less. And with that being said, such a small unit, there seems to be a lot of animosity between the people that were a part of the unit now. But were you guys close with each other then? And did everyone get along within the unit at that time?
I always
Yeah.
like,
Go ahead, Angela.
yeah, I always got along with Lyn. I used to sit beside you, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. And,
One time I sat beside you.
the animosity that showed up afterwards was basically because of one person who kept stirring things up and trying to make it look like we were all against each other. And actually, it wound up we were all against him because he kept stirring stuff up. And so that's where the whole thing of the animosity came from. When I came into the unit, I replaced Joe McMonagle,
Yeah.
who's still a very good friend. Paul, the others, very good friends, and I took over the database. And let me say one thing that I don't think I've ever said before. In the database, I was looking at the work that people did.
Oh yeah, you saw it.
Usually, one of the highest accuracy ratings was Angela Della Fiora at the time.
At the time.
Yeah, but she had just amazingly high accuracy, and that was fantastic.
Now, were you getting this feedback at the time, Angela? Because from my understanding,
Some of it, it's hard because a lot of it, if we worked operations, a lot of times, we weren't getting feedback from the, I guess, the analyst. It was just, that's just the way the intelligence community works. You collect information, you give it to the analyst, and they either use it, they don't use it. I know out of the 32 years that I've spent in the intelligence community, it was only 9 of those years that I was a remote viewer where I collected the intelligence. But my other years, I worked as an analyst. And as an analyst, I was so busy reading things and trying to put papers together and try to get published, because you have to you write papers so that the policymakers can make decisions on what to do. And the last thing, I collected data, so it really didn't matter where it came from. I was just collecting the information. And I do know that the collectors, you need to tell them, hey, you did a great job, or hey, I need this. But that was the last thing on my mind. So I always had to be reminded, go, or the collectors helping you. If they are, go tell them that they're doing a good job. So When I was I guess that's just the way the intelligence community works. Is that right, Lyn?
Yeah, sure. I know one time I was up at DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, asking for some feedback, and I was told, "I'm sorry, you're not cleared for the information you gave us."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and many times we would get a general idea, maybe not the specifics, and maybe nobody really know the real specifics till sometime later. I remember a few projects where we had to wait for satellite photography results, maybe 6 months after the fact, after the session, before we could really say anything definitive about the work we did, other than just say it correlated with what we knew at the time. But we were more interested in what's going to happen in the future for some of those projects, which we had to wait for. And I know there were some projects we actually never did get real feedback on. So like Angela says, you just had to be geared up, so to speak, to accept what information you did receive. It could be very general. It would be nice to get a very specific thing, but many times in the intelligence work, you put pieces together, and for any kind of intelligence system, and then you have to wait a while to see what develops, and what you put together is on track or not. And sometimes that takes months of years to do.
And not only that, but there are times when, there will be a project up higher than we were, and in order to give us feedback, it would mean that they admitted that there was such a project. So, that's the intelligence. That's the nature of the intelligence community.
But I think we did a good job on getting. I mean, I think Dale, you did a good job on getting us customers, on getting us feedback. And there were certain things we would go after if we worked on something. There were certain things that we would go after and say, "Can you give us feedback or something?"
Sure. Yeah, it worked out on more quite well, considering the constraints that we had.
Yeah.
And then there were people changing up front in the front office that kind of complicated the issues from time to time. Now we had a intelligence community workforce established, which actually helped identify tasks for us that we would feed into the group, and we had to have a filtering on this too, and look at it from the point of view: is it we get feedback, even if we're correct, would it be worthwhile doing? Or is the task a little bit beyond what we think we can do at this time? And there were some limitations on that. Somebody comes in and wants to know a precise number of the yield of a certain weapon. I'm not sure that was passed on, because number reliability is usually not that great in remote viewing. So there were some things we had to look at too to filter. So, but those that did pass through, we kept badgering the customer, so to speak, and had to wait until more information became available to them as well.
Yeah, you had to make the tasking conducive to remote viewing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, did this program have congressional oversight? Was Congress aware of this remote viewing psychic program?
Oh, absolutely. My goodness, heavens, yes. In fact, every year there were annual reports and reviews and briefings that went to various congressional levels. The House and Senate budget committees had to review it. There were other ways in which the information was presented, but and sometimes it was simply to a closed door hearing on Capitol Hill, on the Hill as we called it. So of course there was documentation, there was briefings, there were written reports, there were briefings, all these forms of communication on more than an annual basis. I mean, you could never be sure when it would be a quick reaction task coming in on a Friday afternoon at 2:00. They had to be finished by 5:00 that day for Monday morning. So I can remember spending weekends in the DIA office and trying to pull a lot of this together and running up to Fort Meade. This is before I actually became assigned full time up there to try to put together some of these quick reaction reports. This was a really continuous kind of activity. You had to be expressing it, and it could come in from any congressional member. So it was not always the more formal route. There were more the informal connections as well.
Yeah, I only ask because there's a lot of talk right now within the UFO congressional hearing. People are making claims that there are special access programs that are being run above congressional oversight. And I wasn't for sure because there's a lot of back and forth with some of these remote viewing programs in the late 70s into the 80s and stuff. Some of them were special access programs and some of them weren't. So I was just trying to clear that up.
Well, initially, I'd say not all the activities were the special access. The research part, for example, was never part of the special access program, even though current claims by individuals involved make it sound like it was. So in addition to the congressional oversight, we had very stringent scientific oversight as well. At the research level, panels would meet, maybe if not annually, sort of semi-annually. And within DIA, we had the DOD, Department of Defense level scientific community convened every few months, sometimes every month. So we had that kind of oversight as well, not just the congressional stuff that went on. So a lot. In fact, toward the end of my tenure, it seemed like I was spending 90% of my time involved in these kinds of committees and very little time available to really devote to the demands of the group, which was really upsetting to me. I spent a lot of time getting reports together and briefings and all that. Not just on current activity, but the history and everything. It was a time-consuming activity to be constantly getting ready to appear in front of review committees.
Now, who was responsible for the research aspect of this? Was this SRI International, or was this Army? Was this who was responsible for the research side?
Well, early on, I think it was 1972, is when the initial remote viewing research effort began at the Stanford Research Institute with Hal Puthoff and Russell Carr. And then later on, in 1976, thereabouts, when I became involved officially, when I was with the Air Force Foreign Technology Division. At that time, we had allocated a small research fund contract to SRI, the Stanford Research Institute, to continue the research. So that was through, at that time it was through the Air Force, and then later on it became consolidated under the Defense Intelligence Agency with contributions from other sources as well. But it was mainly through the group at Stanford Research Institute, and later on at Maine, I became the director of that effort. So that was, and then there was occasionally subcontracts that were let out, but those were secondary. They weren't the main focus of the primary research that they were doing at SRI. But we didn't do any research in the unit. In fact, we were an operational-oriented unit. We couldn't do that because of the way our funding was allocated. It was operational-oriented. We couldn't really actually do our own research, so to speak.
You have any thoughts on this, Angela or Lyn?
Well, I want to ask Lyn, because I always get this question, and I want to put this out to Lyn and Dale, but people always think there's another remote viewing program going on, and I don't think there is. Do you, Lyn?
I don't think there was. As far as research, I know that each of our viewers did our own little research projects just to find out how to become better, and we shared the results and all that. But there were no formal, like Dale said, there were no formal research projects. But there was an incident when I first got into the unit, I had done the PK and killed the computers over in Germany. And Brian took me into the office and he said, "We don't do that here. We do passive mental work, and we don't affect things." And so I went out to my desk. Skip Atwater came by, and he said, "I suppose Brian told you that we don't do active mental work here." And I said, "Yes, he did." And then Skip said something that he never explained and I never asked. He said, "That's right. We don't do that here," and turned around and walked off. Now, what he meant by that, I have no idea.
Lyn, what was he? Do you remember what generally he was referencing to at the time? Any idea?
I think that Odom was in charge at the time.
Oh,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but again, I think Ryder's question had to do with the research. So
Yeah.
I don't think that we never had any indirect connection beyond that, other than, like you say, we did little projects of our own.
Sure.
Mainly for proficiency. We'd hardly call that research, but you had to organize it sort of like a research activity, so you wouldn't be kidding yourself with results. So sure, I did some of those on the side myself, but I never advertised them to anybody. So
yeah, everyone does. When I got to the unit, Joe McGonigal had all these charts and everything where he had been doing doing studies as to why you have good days and bad days.
Now, sometimes there was confusion that came up because there were other people within the government that took it upon themselves to bring together people that they called remote viewers. And of course, they weren't really through the same route that we had developed and chosen. But that's what the term they used. I have no idea where these people came from. And they went off and running on certain projects too. That happened at the time I was involved in the General Dozier search. There was another group that was also caught up in that, but we had nothing to do with that. And then it sort of actually had a negative effect on the results or the image of our activity later on. But that group was totally independent. It was self-defined, and it was supported by a certain individual at congressional levels, actually. But it was something people did. They just jumped into the scene and started running with it. But it was not anything official. And
no, it wasn't at all. No.
Not official. And, there were other little elements that popped up every now and then where people said, oh, they were part of. Because at that time, not many people really were aware of the activity at Fort Meade. Yet there was enough I guess, rumor floating around, and they would say, yeah, there was an activity like that somewhere. Maybe Angela might remember it better than I, but there was an incident one time where a journalist from England, and I'm not sure if you were there at the time or not, Lyn, but he actually had information about not only our unit, but where we were located roughly on Fort Meade. So we had a meeting. I had to change our driving habits and alter your patterns in case you're being followed. I had to alert the base police and all that. So we had to take extra precaution because of these rumors that were floating around, and there were other rumors too. So you never really knew what was going to be coming up. It could be from some journalists. It could be from someone that fancies themselves to be a competing remote viewing group somewhere, not necessarily within the government. So. Those elements.
So this was you believe that this was an actual remote viewing group from England? Do we know of other?
They were just journalists that got information and started.
So investigative journalists.
Yeah,
that makes sense. So a bunch of unofficial programs have ran since the closing of Stargate.
They weren't even programs. They were just maybe something an individual kludged together.
Yeah. Angela, have you ever been approached by? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Then.
I would come up with a question, and I would try something out 100 times, keep data on it, sometimes I'd write a paper and turn it in, but that wasn't anything official. That was just me trying to answer a question. So it was my own research, but not, it couldn't be called task research.
Yeah.
Angela, have you ever been approached in a unofficial capacity by an official to do some sort of remote viewing for them?
Yeah, whenever the program closed in 1995, I went back to DIA I was an analyst, and there was an office that wanted, it was very unofficial, but an office wanted me to look at something for them, which I did on my own time. Well, after that, I don't know what information I received, but it was able to help another gentleman. So they brought this other gentleman in, and then I did do something. It was in an unofficial. It was unofficial.
Mm-hmm.
But I did. I mean, somebody approached me to help them. Did that happen to you at all, Lyn?
Oh, yeah, several times. A couple of times a colonel or a general or something would come to the office and sort of lean over the desk and say, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" You know, and the general says, "Can you do me a favor?" What are you going to say? No. Yeah.
But
Right.
Lyn, was that during the project before it closed, or was that afterwards?
That was while I was there in the project. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I thought, and Angela's talking about times afterwards.
I'm talking about after they closed the program in 1995.
Okay. Yeah. After the program closed, I've had several people from DIA call and ask me to do some things, but that's again totally unofficial. Yeah.
Yeah, I expected that was going on. I was quite aware of that myself, but by that time I was not on the scene because I actually had left the DC area in 1993, so I didn't really, I wasn't really up to all the little activities that were going on after it closed. So, but I did catch rumors. But you know, rumors are sometimes not reliable, as we know.
Now, guys, there's a group of people out there, mostly on the internet, that claim they were a part of a Stargate program that was opening up real portals, like Stargate portals, like from Star Trek, that would allow them to like time travel and go to different planets and stuff and teleport, which is completely preposterous. But I want to get your guys' comments on this to clear up that Army intelligence and the DIA wasn't opening up real Stargate portals so the military personnel could time travel, correct?
Not according to that stuff. No way. You know, of course, you can argue theoretically that how does this phenomena work at all? You know, something is being accessed that we don't understand. Now, we can give it different labels. If I really want to exaggerate and say every time I did a precognitive project, this is after I left the project, was I entering a time portal, or a portal hole, or whatever you want to call it? Sure. These concepts aren't bad, but there's nothing we did officially that said we were zipping into a portal of any kind. You know, we just accepted the fact that the stuff worked. We didn't give it that kind of labeling that some people like to do in the science fiction side.
And there are a lot of people claiming to have been in the unit that were never in the unit and never had anything to do with it.
Where do you think that confusion comes from, though? Do you think that they're actively lying, or do you think that they were possibly a part of something similar, like the Gateway process with Robert Monroe, and they're getting it confused? Or what do you think's going on there? Are they actively lying, or are they making it up, or were they a part of something similar?
The ones I've seen are actively lying. Yeah. But
they're generating a concept which they think will get a lot of attention. So there was a book that came out about a year after or two after the name Stargate that we developed the name Stargate. I think it was called the Stargate Conspiracy, and then there's a TV program. So that took a lot of traction. A lot of people associated eye activities, in hindsight, they thought with what we had. So there were terms like portals in that book, but I had absolutely nothing. That was a fiction book, had absolutely nothing to do with what we were doing. So maybe some of that material from that book, and I think there was a TV program that followed a little later, added to the image of, hey, we're at Fort Meade, we're going into time portals and all that stuff. So it's easy to build from what's in the media and imagine things, but we never did anything. Our concepts had never had anything like that in it.
Yeah, it seems like a way almost to discredit what you guys were actually doing within the program, to make it about this mythological thing that never really happened, to be able to cover up what you guys were actually doing. That's the way that I see it. And that's the way that I see disinformation and misinformation really working. It serves as a cover for the real thing. What's your guys' thoughts?
I never would have thought of it that way. We never needed to be concerned about developing our cover because we didn't really have much exposure anywhere. Nothing. Yeah. We didn't need to cover anything.
I mean, like after the fact, after the Stargate program had been disclosed and unclassified, right?
No, I sure don't see it that way.
I mean, I don't mean like you guys actively doing it or people actively doing it, but like the mythology surrounding it, creating a life of its own and then taking on a life of its own and then being regurgitated over and over again. Not specifically to cover up the activities of the DIA or Army intelligence, but an inadvertent way to do it. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Maybe. I don't know. Who knows what the motives are?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems like the Philadelphia experiment as well. You had the Philadelphia experiment, and then you have the movie, The Philadelphia Experiment, that just threw on a bunch of lore and a bunch of mythology on top of it. Right?
Yeah, and even with that experiment, there could be a glimmer of truth to it. We just don't know what really happened when they were testing those high frequency radar systems on that ship. It could have stirred up somebody's neurons in such a way that they hallucinated. You don't want to walk in front of a high energy system like that and not expect some kind of effect from the radar energies that are going through your brain. So maybe something physiological did happen that led to imagery and flights of fancy, so to speak. But to say that they were real, that's really stretching the point.
Absolutely. And I think that another thing that needs to be cleared up with this program, were children ever involved with the Stargate program or the DIA or Army intelligence at all?
Children?
Children.
Nope. No, we had families, and we tried to keep the information away from them. But beyond that, any hinting that our children might have had, no way. Nope.
Any comment on that, Angela or Lynn?
No, we didn't.
There was no such involvement.
Now, have you heard anything, Lynn, about that? You were closer to a lot of the rumor mills than I was in D.C., and you also, Angela, because I moved out of the area.
What year did you move out of the area, Dale? It was after 93.
Yeah, I left in 93. Well, I stayed there, but I didn't move away until a couple of years later.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, was to your guys' knowledge, was SRI or SRI International ever involved with children or ever studied on children to any of your guys' knowledge?
Not that I know of.
Now, in the parapsychology community, occasionally you find groups of parapsychologists going to schools to give them a standard ESP test. Not in recent times, but that's the closest I know of any psychic work, psi work with younger people. But to extrapolate that to say in our times, or in the time frame we're talking about, working with children directly, I certainly have no knowledge in it. I can't believe anything like that ever happened. I think we would picked up something in our system.
Absolutely, I agree. And that was just an important thing to clear up because there's a lot of rumors, and I want to try and clear that kind of stuff up with you guys while I have you here. And there's another thing that people want me to ask that I keep forgetting to ask is that a lot of people suggest that the entire unit was involved with Scientology. And I think it's an important thing to ask the question, is anyone here involved or formally involved with Scientology?
No.
No, we were never connected with that activity at all. No one. Now, you might want to push the boundary here a little bit and say at one time, Ingo Swann, because he early on he was a member of Scientology, but then he abandoned that and was very emphatic about it. But he was never an official member of the unit. He remained connected through the research side with Ed May, but not in the Stargate unit. I mean, now, please keep in mind the word Stargate really applies only to the operational activity at Fort Meade, where Lyn and Angela and others were involved in it, and the preceding code words as well. It related only to the operational activity, not to the research, even though it's being assumed or subsumed currently with people involved in research that it was. But the research activity was to support the operational unit, but they were not part of Stargate. Stargate was strictly, and the previous names like Center Lane and Grill Flame, it related only to people at Fort Meade and those that were given access to the Fort Meade activities, but not to the research. That was not part of the classified special access program.
Another thing you'll hear too is people saying, "Oh, I was targeted by that group."
Yeah.
And previously, Presidential Order 11905 was superseded by 12333, which actually forbade us from collecting intelligence on U.S. citizens, viewing U.S. citizens, except, of course, the thing, if it was for national security and all, the thing like the rogue drug agents that Angela just nailed.
Yeah, thanks for clearing that up. So nobody that you guys are aware of that was a part of the Stargate program was an active member of Scientology. Where do you think that rumor
I'll tell you, it came from, I think it came from SRI, because Ingo Swann was a Scientology, Pat Price was, and there may have been other members at SRI that were Scientologists. And I think that's where that kind of came from. And I think Pat Price kind of went to the church and told them that he felt as a Scientologist, he should tell them what he was working with SRI, and he had a low clearance for some classified information. And I think that's where all of that came from, but not in our unit.
No.
Angela, that's correct. That's what I was saying earlier. It was strictly related to the earlier
yeah.
at SRI.
Yeah.
But of course, the operational unit at Fort Meade really didn't start gaining momentum formally until 1979. So we're talking about activity at SRI back in 1972 and prior, actually. The people were involved in that. So we're not connected with that at all.
Debunked. We just debunked it. Another rumor down the toilet.
No, it's odd, that the Scientology group, even though I had studied it formally, I read the books, I would never, but I wanted to know what it was about. So I got all the L. Ron Hubbard material I could find just to know what people were talking about. And so I was prepared to deal with it should it come up, but it didn't, not in the group. But surprisingly, before I even moved to Washington, D.C., while I was still with the Foreign Technology Division, a coworker had asked me to help him out to try to counsel his son because his son was a member of Scientology and wanted to get out of the what he called a cult and couldn't do it. And he knew I was somewhat familiar with readings of it. And so I had, and at that time, before I moved to DC, I actually was involved in counseling work because I was interested maybe in developing an extra line of work through psychological counseling, because that was an interest I had at the time. And so I worked with that individual and a few others to try to, deprogram that. But that's my closest involvement, and that was before I even moved to Washington, D.C. and became involved in the Stargate unit.
So, Lyn, you were just mentioning the ability to spy on U.S. citizens. And from my understanding, the Stargate program used remote viewing or psychic phenomenon to collect intelligence information.
On foreign targets.
Yeah.
Right. Now, was there ever a time that you can recall that it wasn't on a foreign target, that it was something else?
Sure.
Yes, let me jump in here. There is an exception to what Lyn said, and that is if the individual is an international fugitive and appears in all the international lists of here's the most wanted guy, like that list in England or London. I'm sorry, Paris. I've forgotten the name of it, but that list international fugitives. If the individual appears there and is designated as an international fugitive, it's fair game, and that's what led us to work on the project that then Angela worked on, and I'm not certain right now if Lyn was involved. He probably was when we were trying to locate a fugitive in the U.S. We didn't know where he was at the time, but he had been a customs official that became somebody that allowed the drug runners to run into ports in Florida without being apprehended because he tipped them off. And when he was discovered as having this role, he fled and became a fugitive that the Customs Department is trying to locate. So that's an example of somebody that's fair game, and he really was a U.S. citizen. So it's those kinds of circumstances where, it can be we can work. U.S. intelligence sources can be applied to a U.S. citizen.
Yeah. Presidential Order 1233 outlines it very succinctly as to what can be and cannot be collected on U.S. citizens, and in what circumstances. Yeah.
So nothing other than a fugitive that might be in the United States. There wasn't any other task that didn't involve intelligence collection, whether that on foreign intelligence collection, whether that be official or unofficial tasking.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about the hostages? What about the hostages in Iran?
Yeah, those are U.S. citizens, but of course they were. It was in that national security and also the military security, and so that was allowable. We weren't looking into their private lives.
We were just trying to find them.
We were just trying to find them and hopefully get them rescued. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Now, I know, Dale, you had a small remote viewing unit at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base that helped locate a missing plane, which, according to the documents I have, happened roughly between somewhere 1979 and 1981, and it was considered the first operational tasking from the Army, which is also interesting because the documents didn't mention Dale's remote viewing Air Force unit, and then the former president, Jimmy Carter, kind of blew the whistle on that and made it public.
Yeah, because then that was really unofficial. We had just a few people, maybe 3 at most. That's pretty small. And we were just we had the blessing, so to speak, of the commander and the chief scientist. This stirred up. We energized this right after I became the contract manager for the SRI work in 1976. It just made sense to see if the claims that SRI was making at the time that anyone can do this. Of course, now we would want to qualify that somewhat, but then if this was that robust a capability, then certainly we don't want to let it go awry and see if somebody in-house within the Air Force that White Patterson Air Force Base could also do this talent. Because when I wrote up the proposals initially for what we could do, I kept focusing on finding airplanes because that's the kind of thing that the Air Force likes to do. If they're losing an airplane, they're going to go out and find it. So it's built from there, and it was just fortuitous that the first task that came up, which was from the Air Force, was to locate a missing airplane. So that's where that generated from. So it was sort of a natural follow-on to our mission with the Air Force. So it was not what you would call intelligence collection, because this is operational. Working to find a missing airplane. So we started off from that angle, and then later on, of course, when Skip Agwater visited me at White Patterson Air Force Base, I finally learned, and this visit occurred about 1978, I believe it was. The first time I had an inkling that the Army was going to be was planning on setting up or hoping to set up an operational unit at Fort Meade. So then I realized, okay, well, here's where the action is going to be. And I didn't press much harder with my group at FTD. I really didn't need to, because I left shortly thereafter and joined the DIA. So I didn't need to. It was the group at Fort Meade when I moved down to Washington.
Now, through my study of remote viewing, it seems like it's a catch-all ability, and it seems like, from what I've spoken with you guys and others about, everyone has the capacity to do it. And there's a lot of different terminology for different ways to remote view: CRV, ERV, remote perturbation, remote influence, remote sensing, outbounder, beacon exercises, and it goes on. In some cases, it's even possible, even our dreams could be considered remote viewing in some aspects. So with that in mind, is there a form of remote viewing that Angela or Lyn, you guys feel is being left out from the remote viewing world now, and more emphasis needs to be put on it? Angela, let's start with you first.
I always thought remote viewing was just a term that the scientists invented. To me, remote viewing always meant ESP, extrasensory perception. And I mean, if sometimes if you do a session, it's like however the information comes, you just let it come. And it can come in many ways. I know a lot of times people think that you see a lot, that you just see, you have this, it's visionary. And a lot of times when I would do sessions, it wasn't so much visionary as feelings or other things would work. So I just always called everything ESP. And then I guess we kind of break it down to our terms to make sense to whoever needs it. I guess people just need it to make sense to them in some way.
Yeah.
I don't know, Lyn, what do you think?
I know that everybody who starts some kind of a project of their own likes to use their own terminology and create their own terms for terms that are already well in use and all that. That's sort of their statement. It's my field. I'm doing this, but I learned the Inga Swan technique, and I use Inga Swan's method, terminology, and all that. And I've stuck to that. I've not needed anything else. However, I am well aware that there are many forms of psychic functioning, and there are many people who are really, really good at it. And so, I see no problem with them using their own terminology. I would love to see some coherence in the field, but I know that the Inga Swan technique almost everybody who does it slightly differently according to their own needs and all. But the structure of the Inga Swan technique is what you report in. And that standardized reporting allowed the military and now allows project managers and all that to look at something. They know the structure, they go through it, they get the information out to where it needs to be much faster. And that's really the strength of the Inga Swan technique, is the structure of the reporting. But yeah, people use other terminology, and we find ourselves constantly trying to translate back and forth to each other when we talk to each other. It's sort of a chaos out there terminology wise.
Do you feel, Lyn, that being able to remote view also boosts your other senses like intuition or precognitive abilities as well?
Yes. Once you get your subconscious mind, once you get your inner child grown up and give it rights and responsibilities, yeah, sometimes you can't shut it up. Yeah.
Angela, you have any thoughts?
No, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Lyn said, that I guess people just, they need to make it comfortable for them, so somehow they can learn or improve or whatever. But I know that, extrasensory perception, that's different than maybe PK or psychokinesis, and then there's clairvoyancy. But it's just, everybody just always says they have to label something to make it comfortable for them to be able to.
I think extrasensory perception is one of the best overall terms.
It's the overall, yeah.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Right. It avoids prejudging, and also PSI, psi phenomenon, because that would be more of an umbrella term, which takes care of all the nuances that we can come up with. And years ago, in the beginning of formula research, usually with J.B. Ryan's work, and maybe a few years earlier in England, they tended to categorize, and like Angela was saying, these words sometimes are more comfort words, more to make us feel comfortable, make us understand something that we don't fully understand. So originally the terms related to the sensory process. If it was something like an image, we call it clairvoyance. If it was something that we heard or felt, or then would be clairaudience. So we all these clear seeing or terms that came out of the French side. So they're just words to categorize a way in which the information is perceived. So if you can lump that together and say it's ESP, it covers all of that. Or go to the more phenomenon concept, that's psi, whatever under that, which is the research term for the area, by the way. So my preference is to stay more on the generic side.
Yeah.
People have a preference to do this or that, or follow the CRV or what Lyn is talking about, or more the more general approach like Angela has, or some of the work I've done since I have left the business is more doing precognitive dream work. So what do you call that? In dreams you have all the stuff going on. You have imagery, sounds, feelings, that's the whole business. So what do you call that? So I just call it precognition.
Yeah.
So that's the other topic too, is, what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with a phenomenon that's primarily here and now oriented, or is our information really primarily a future oriented process that we're accessing? So that's an area I'm really interested in, and try to do some independent research in that.
One of the problems I have with the use of remote viewing is everybody thinks, oh, I'm a remote viewer. Well, they should be using the general term, because remote viewing is a subset of psi phenomena like dowsing and whatever. But new people come into the field, and they may have the talent to be a top-notch dowser, and yet somebody says, "Oh, you're a remote viewer. You have to pick Swan or this other, or and it takes them away from their natural ability."
And
And
I really relate to that. Thanks for bringing that out. Yeah.
Which, talking about the future, Dale, really brings me into my next question. I've had a lot of people harp on me for talking about the past so much, but you have to understand the past to understand the future. So this next question is going to be about the future and what the future of the United States and in turn the world looks like, especially with all of the things that's happened in the past 3 years. Lyn, I know that you remote viewed, I think it was the next 50 years or the next 30 years back in the late 90s or the early 2000s. Am I correct on that?
basically the next 60 years, yeah.
60
And,
years. Yeah, could you let the audience know
well,
what you remote viewed about that?
I didn't find many really good things. Found things like I got the old transcript out. In the year 2020, people will start separating. We'll be communicating more through technology than face to face, and they will, in fact, be actively avoiding face to face. Different things like schools will empty out, businesses, downtown areas will, empty out, and all of this. And projected on further, I've been watching the things come true, and the part of it that I hope I'm wrong on. But Stephen Schwartz and his group viewing the future seems to have found out about the same thing. I found out that by the year 2040, about 75% of the country's population will have been wiped out. And I want to be wrong on that. There are many things I view that I want to be wrong on.
Angela, have you, I don't think I've asked you before, actually, have you done any remote viewing on the future and what's in store for the next, let's say, 20, 30, 40 years at all?
I haven't. I haven't, but I think things are, I think things are happening now that when I was like years ago, I think with the earth, I guess with the hurricanes, with the earth changes, with the earthquakes, I picked up a lot of that type of information, which would change the earth's formation. And that something keeps coming in where I guess that the way that there won't be international boundaries, or there won't be national boundaries between countries. I feel like there's going to be a breakdown there, and that may be happening now. I thought we would be further ahead with the green energy, but we're still very dependent on oil. And I just feel like certain things aren't changing as quickly as they should. But again, there's a lot of free will that goes into the future too. Dale, what do you think?
Yeah, that's one of the difficulties with moving ahead too far into the future. In my precognitive work, I don't call it remote viewing the future. It's a term I don't feel comfortable with. It's precognition. However, whatever term you want to then apply, but it just seems to me there'll be cycles, and it's a matter of how extreme these cycles go. And what little I've done, which is not formally documented, but the idea of boundaries, like Angela's pointing out, there's going to be some really significant changes here. I'm thinking about the Canadian-U.S. border, not just the Mexican line. And of course, Europe boundaries have always been changing a lot. So there's that issue there, which is not to be surprising. There are shifts all the time in that part of the world. But I think cultural assimilation is going to make a big difference in the general populations throughout the world. The one area will become more dominant here, another more dominant there. So, I see huge shifts there, even in this country, and even before, even 20 years ago, I could kind of sense that coming. But in terms of any major conflicts, sure, there'll be saber rattling, and there'll be threats of dropping nuclear stuff like Putin does from time to time. But I don't see that happening. But there'll certainly be some rough times. Economic disasters will hit, but that's cyclical. That's been true in the past. So, but history, unfortunately, sometimes is not remembered too well. Like you're pointing out, right? We should study the history to understand the past, but many of us do study the history and still don't understand the past. Move right ahead. So yeah, but the biggest effect will be this technology bit, the social media. That I don't think I foresaw that impact. That's going to be huge in terms of forming opinions and shifting perspectives, right or wrong. We see that going on right now in the political environment. So how that plays out, I'm not sure. I don't feel too good about it. So I think there'll be some really tough times. So my feeling is there are going to be some nasty times ahead, and not just here in this country, but worldwide. Will we be adaptable? And one thing I try to do in the action I have with the groups I work with, and my focus is on precognition. And so I try to encourage people to accept what is in the near-term future and be able to work with it or around it. So my perspective is be alert, be prepared, be flexible. And if more people can do that and be forewarned through their intuitions and dreams, I think we can navigate, most of us, when we adapt this, when we learn what psi phenomena is and how it can be beneficial to us. As groups that do this, then we can move a little easier. Maybe not easier, but survive better than some of the others that may be the issues in the decades ahead. Survivability may be a big key in the future for all of us.
Lyn, did you see anything to do with the boundaries like Angela and Dale are talking about? Did you see anything with that when you...
All I saw was the boundaries getting softer and more pliable. But other than that, I didn't see anything specifically about that. Yeah.
And I like the way that Dale used the word, that's precognition, because remote viewing is you put the task in the envelope, you put the picture in the envelope, and you get the immediate feedback. So it is precognition.
Yeah. It's precognition using the tools
of remote
viewing, but it's precognition.
Yeah. Precognition, yeah. There are different tools. Years ago, I studied some of the concepts from the Edgar Cayce Foundation, and there's some really good insights there too that we could adapt in the remote viewing community. Probably we have individually, although we don't call it that. There are lots of insights from different experts and proficient individuals in the past. So not just what we learned from Ego Swan, but a number of people.
Yeah, because my mother was a big Edgar Cayce, and he was more like into meditation or self kind of visualization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he also he would put a book. He couldn't read. He was basically illiterate, and he would put a book under his pillow at night, put his head on the pillow with a book underneath the pillow, and then wake up and would know everything in the book. Apparently, according to lore and according to people that knew him at the time, which is pretty interesting. Yeah, so there's someone that was mentioning something about time in the chat, and it was Lorietta here. She says that, come on, writer, time there is no time. How do you guys perceive time when you're remote viewing, or maybe you're not even remote viewing or using your psychic abilities?
Well, for me, obviously there is time. Oh, yeah, you can't get around that. But I see it as part of the space-time continuum, which means that when you get really esoteric about it, that since space is three-dimensional and time is a part of that continuum, time has to be three-dimensional too, which means you can go sideways off at angles in time and forward and backward and all this. But that's getting pretty far out there, you know. But that's the way I see time, is it's an integral part of the space-time continuum.
Angela, you got anything?
I don't know. I know whenever I do remote viewing, I don't know. I think that it's always easier to remote view the past and the present, but it's hard to remote view the future because of free will and anything can happen. So that's hard sometimes.
Dale, you got anything on
Yeah,
time?
I've done experiments here. In fact, one of them got published in a physics publication when we were looking at pictures. Our objective was to perceive pictures that would be published 3 days ahead or 7 days ahead at a specific age. And we were able to do that with a really good degree of accuracy.
Sure.
So now here's the situation where the picture hasn't been taken, the event hasn't yet occurred. And some of these were natural events too, like windstorms or ice breaks. So somehow or another, there's an element in that we can perceive that's either projected into the future from known information that we perceive from a projection standpoint, or we perceive a future that already exists in the future that's coming our way. You know, in physics, there's a term called retrocausation, which links with the idea that time equations of electrodynamics have a solution that goes backwards in time as well as forward. So something in the future is flowing backwards to cause an incident now to happen, and we can maybe perceive that approaching event through precognitive ability. So some futures seem really quite fixed, and others are not. That we have free will, we navigate around them. Right. So to me, it's a huge mystery. Time. Like Lyn was saying, there seem to be different aspects to time. And one of them is a dimension that runs into a future perspective with the XY coordinate with it and information with it at that point in time in the future. So we have the ability to access some of this information, which is really quite amazing. You know, why would we as creatures have this ability? It's beyond survival, beyond Darwinism. You know, we don't need to know. We might. It might be nice to know what's around the corner to avoid the tiger that's there. But what good is it for us to know what might be coming our way 10 days from now? You know, is that survival? Maybe it is. I don't know. So maybe it is connected to a survival input that we don't fully understand. And so the universe is really constructed in an amazing way that the future can be perceived. And this is why I've been spending a lot of my years recently in actually studying precognition. It's the most amazing phenomenon of all. Of course, PK that's also amazing too. So
yeah.
So it's something. Information exists about the future. Now, is it in the future? I don't know, but it's about the future. So, is it? Where is that time now, or a projection of it? So, yeah, I have all these questions I'm pondering.
Yeah, and we found out long ago that once you start teaching somebody the remote viewing, one of the first things they do is view their feedback that will be given to them later. You can give them a target and they'll do the target just fine. You give them another target but show them the wrong feedback, they won't get the target. They'll get a view of what you are showing them of the wrong thing. They're actually just looking at few moments into the future. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. Now, speaking of the past, and it's easier to remote view the past than the present. Have either you, Lyn or Angela, went back and viewed something of importance in the past? And if you have, could you comment on that for the audience?
Well, yeah, that's what you train on for
That's what-
one.
Yeah.
Is there something that sticks in your mind that just jumps out that you remote viewed, such as I don't know, the Titanic sinking or anything of that nature? Anything that just sticks out in your mind about the past or a past event?
Why did the Aztec cities empty out overnight? What happened with Marilyn Monroe? Who, all of this stuff.
We did, I think, Stonehenge. I think Stonehenge, and then I think it was the when the Jewish people lived at the top. Was that Masada? Was that
Masada? Yeah.
Masada? We did that. We did Stonehenge.
What'd you figure out about Stonehenge? What happened there?
Can't even remember. I think it kind of came up a little esoteric for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was more than just the stones in a circle.
Like I say, those were practice targets where the target wasn't nearly as important as the learning of what to do. And so, everybody has their own favorite target. Oh, practice target. Oh, yeah, I nailed this 100%. And they will remember it. But for the most part, it was just practice targets to teach you how to do something, either by learning or just getting you to do it just as a habit. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's Lyn, there's layers to this. You might be able to describe quite well the appearance as it is now or reconstructed through archaeology. But the purpose of it, again, that's not apparent by looking at our data. So the purpose now, if it comes out at all in a session, may be buried in our own subconscious expectations. We can't be absolutely certain it's the accurate version. It could be just what we sort of deduced subconsciously. So there's an issue I have with going back to these historical targets. Once you get past describing the visuals and how it is now or is reconstructed, when you get to purpose, it's now we're getting to interpretation. And I think, as we all know, in interpreting the data is a challenge, is a real challenge.
Yeah.
But we don't know what it really is.
Yeah, that's the thing. History is not written by the victors; it's written by the survivors. And
whose history book are you accessing? What not necessarily book, but what substream in the collective unconscious are you?
You can always get the picture, but when you go to purpose,
and intention
purpose, then things get a little bit fuzzy.
That's right. You really need to qualify. This is an opinion, a possible interpretation.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that I'm going to give you guys each a little bit of time, starting with Angela first, if there was anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to talk about in this amazing roundtable discussion, and if not, let people know where they can find you online, or if you would like, if anyone would like to reach out to you with questions, let them know where they can contact you.
Oh, do you have my email?
Yes, I got your email.
Can you give him my email? Do you have my cell phone number?
I think it's in the email. Yes.
Okay, that. So,
Thanks so much, Angela. Appreciate your time this evening. Lynn, is
and
there
I
any?
want to say it was nice seeing Dale and Lynn. I haven't seen Lynn forever. You look great. You look
Thank
great.
you. You too. Thank you.
Lynn, was there anything that you would like to mention that we maybe didn't cover in the roundtable discussion here? And if not, then let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, like Angela said, I think you have my website and my email. Also, I'm teaching online now rather than in person, and I've bought a ranch. It's way out in the middle of nowhere called the Remote View Ranch. It's remote, man, what a view! And we're going to be doing all kinds of training for police departments, for students, for anyone, and we're in the process of developing right now. There's a page called remoteviewranch.com, and if anybody wants to look at what we're doing, have a good look. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Lynn. Appreciate your time this evening. Dale, do you have anything for that we possibly didn't cover in this roundtable discussion before we wrap up?
Well, again, my shift from my days with the remote viewing research, and then, of course, my connection with the Stargate unit and the previously named code words for that unit. And since I left the Washington, D.C. area, gosh, 2 decades ago, my focus has really been on inner work, dream work, and precognitive dreams, and synchronicities.
Yeah.
I feel synchronicity is a key to understanding precognition up to some level of precognition. And it's a very important aspect of our lives. And we have synchronicities, we may not recognize them. But it's another way of saying or recognizing the fact that we are constantly scanning the future. So there are times when we do things, we don't know why we do it, and turn out to be really, really good. We found a thing, we were looking for it somehow. We do that? Or the right person, bump into that. It was a synchronistic kind of experience, but all along, it was there in our subconscious mind through our precognitive abilities, and we were able to navigate and have that intersection. So synchronicity and precognition, the things I believe fit together, and that's kind of what I've been doing in recent years in some of my informal work and more formal dream research. I stay with dreams now because I find it's a lot easier for people to do that. And again, I'm not looking for detailed kinds of information, but just enough to help people out. And you don't need to fill a page of data. And all you really need is one piece of good information, and that's what you can get out of precognitive dreaming. So I'm doing that, and if anybody wants to learn a little bit more, I do have an email, and you can contact me there.
Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate your time this evening. It was an honor and a privilege to
Thank
have
you.
all of you guys here. Would love to do it again sometime. We can do it anytime. Thank you guys so much, and thanks everyone in the chat. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. I will be back on Tuesday. See you guys next time.